Hey YouTube, what's going on? My name is Zora and I've got a different video for you guys today. I'm going to be doing a full breakdown, commentary and VOD review of my most recent Razsageth Heroic kill as a Guardian Druid. I'm pretty active in the Dreamgrove Discord, and recently in the Bear channel we've had an increasing number of questions from people asking how to tank Razsageth Heroic. People have had a lot of questions about gear choices, talent setups, trinket use and so on, so I thought I'd do a full breakdown of my most recent kill and shed some insight on that for you guys. Okay, so first off guys, I'm going to go over the gear that I ran on the kill. So I was 411 eye level, this is our second kill, so I am quite inflated. Bear that in mind when referencing this kill. If you are lower eye level, then you might have a harder time defensively or with aggro and intermissions than I did. I will talk about that more when I go over the VOD review, but there are definitely points in the fight where you're going to have to pop more cooldowns if you're lower eye level. But yeah, something to bear in mind. I am also running 4 set. I do have 2 heroic and 2 normal pieces of tier. As for my crafted gear, I've got 4 pieces on now. I've got the cowl, the lariat neck, the engineering wrists, and also leatherworking belt. I'm not specifically running verse or haste verse on these pieces for defensive value. That's just what my sim told me to run, so make sure you are simming all your gear, guys. Just run whatever the sim tells you pretty much. As for the rings, I'm running the Court of Stars ring that I farmed along with the Scholar's Loop. This is from the Cobalt Reputation. I'm running both of these for DPS. If you don't have the loop as a Guardian Druid, I would definitely recommend farming the Cobalt Reputation for this ring. Our talents do buff arcane damage, so this ring is a significant amount of our breakdown. It's very prominent for Guardian Druid, and it's definitely worth picking up. It's pretty quick, it takes about an hour now, so yeah, definitely farm this. As for my trinket setup, I was running a 411 Grief Torch along with a 415 Whetstone, so I opted to run double on use. This kill was my first time ever playing double on use. I got the Grief Torch in the vault this Wednesday, and I do actually mess up the double on use quite significantly on this kill, but again I'll talk about that a bit more later. Then next is moving into my talents. This was the talent setup that I ran on Raszageth. I'm running a pretty offensive setup. I do chase logs, so yeah, this is something that's pretty DPS oriented. I didn't opt to run Earth Warden, I wasn't running second SI, I didn't run any of the Ironfair talents, I wasn't running Blood Frenzy, I also didn't run Innovate. Again, sending full DPS. Now, there have been talks in the Guardian channel about, do you run Earth Warden? You know, some people talking about taking second SI charge. A lot of people do take Innovate as well. For me, I didn't feel like I needed the defensive values anymore, though our kill time was fairly quick. I will talk about timings in the fight later on when I go through the VOD of specific moments where I think a second SI charge might be useful, but again, I didn't feel like I needed it personally. But if you're in a lower ranked guild or you're in a pug where you can't call externals and you've got a much longer kill time than we did, then there is definitely a possibility to run second SI in this fight, in my opinion. For Innovate as well, I think it's very cringe on Blizzard's part that we went into the expansion having Innovate but not being able to use it in bear form. I've told my guild I ain't picking it until it's reworked, and luckily that's happening in a couple of weeks. So yeah, I don't take Innovate myself. Yeah, I'm just not taking it. The only talent that I would definitely recommend taking on this fight above all else is Incap Roar. Incap Roar in this fight is so useful. These spark ads that spawn can be Incap Roared and you'll break a massive handful of them. Again, I'll go into more detail later, but this is definitely, in my opinion, a hard pick. And as for everything else, you do have a couple of variables, whether you want to go offensive or more defensive. But this is the talent setup I ran, and now let's jump into the VOD review. Okay guys, I've got the VOD open now, so I'm going to go through every single phase and how I played the boss. So for starters, I am tanking with a Blood DK this tier. We're playing Bear Blood DK. It's not quite as good as Prot Warrior Blood DK, but I think Bear is a pretty suitable replacement for a Prot Warrior this tier. We sort of slot into their position quite nicely. Blood DK on this fight is extremely good. If you have the option to tank with one, I would definitely recommend it on this fight. Having a Blood DK and Raszageth just changes the fight so significantly from a tank POV, and it's a massive help. As I said earlier as well, I do play heavily for DPS, so that's something to also bear in mind in terms of looking at my playstyle. I will talk about a few things that I do definitely to increase my DPS, which maybe you don't have to follow. But as I'm doing so much DPS on this kill, Blood DK can't really compete with Bear single target, especially with the trinket setup I'm using. My opener is pretty unique, I guess. I actually still pre-pot even though you don't have to pre-pot anymore, and I Heart of the Wild on 1 second on the countdown. That means that I can roll into all my cooldowns into a whetstone to get it on CD as soon as possible. So you're going to see in a minute I'm going to pre-pot, I'm going to Heart of the Wild, I'm going to use Whetstone, Bark Skin, Incarn and Rage of the Sleeper just to get all of my offensive CDs out. Yes, Bark Skin is pretty defensive, but you are getting a tiny amount of damage from the Brambles Pulse, and there's no reason not to have it on cooldown. Obviously Incarn's your biggest DPS CD, Rots is a damage increase, buffing your trinket quite significantly, and same with Heart of the Wild on the pot. So I'm just sending everything on cooldown on the pool to pump as much damage as I can. This establishes me a lot of threat. You're going to see even through double MD, I'm taking the first tank here. I do taunt on pool though, so yeah. My DK does get double MD just to make sure that he can sustain aggro after the first tank hit. So putting the boss here, we do the countdown. You're going to see 1 second, pre-pots up, I use Heart of the Wild, combat starts. This is a visual bug, I don't know why my frame does this, but for 1 second into combat, the boss frame and my target go white, but that's fine. I do taunt the boss here. As I'm taunting, I'm already pressing Bark Skin, it's not on GCD. Into an Incarn, into a Rage of the Sleeper, and I'm going to pop Whetstone here. I'm establishing my Thresh stacks straight away, that's very important. Make sure you're always prioritizing Thresh if they're not up. I'm very lucky here, I do actually get a Moonfire proc on the pool. This saves me having to waste the GCD. I do get that Galactic Guardian proc, so that's really nice. I get another one there as well. I'm just pumping damage. In my peak of DPS here, I hit about 110k, so it's a pretty strong opener. Now this here, one thing I didn't know, as I mentioned at the start of the video, this was my first raid playing Double on Use and my first raid playing Grief Torch. Now I wasn't entirely familiar with how the trinket worked, but there is actually like a weird grace period where Grief Torch comes off CD, but no matter how much you spam it or press it, it doesn't work. So this really threw me off on this kill, because here I'm spamming Grief Torch and nothing's actually happening. What ends up happening is I spam it so much that I think it's not going to go off and I cancel the cast, so I really screw up my opener. But anyway, that's something more DPS related. In terms of the boss, I've taken the first tank kit. I don't have to pop any Iron Furs for it. I know that I've got so many cooldowns running, Incarn for the increased HP, I've got a Bark up plus a Rage of the Sleeper. I'm absolutely fine. There's no need to really Iron Fur with all of these cooldowns rolling for that first tank kit, especially on pool. Healers have nothing to do, so you can get a massive chunk of healing from them if you need it, which you shouldn't do anyway with these cooldowns rolling. So I take the first tank hit. As soon as I get hit here, my co-tank's taunting. We've got the first breath. That goes through the group. The group's dodging that breath there. You can see here, this is where I mess up my Grief Torch, and you can see that weird little camera pan that I did just now. I was a bit tilted about the use of it, but yeah, whatever. My co-tank gets the hit, and I taunt the boss. Now, one thing that I will say, on my first kill, or not my first kill, my first night of this boss 2 weeks ago, when you taunt the boss, you've still got a few seconds of the debuff. I did not respect this debuff enough. Our first kill, I was sub 400. I was taunting, sometimes with 1 Iron Fur, sometimes with no Iron Furs. I really did not respect this debuff. For me personally, when you taunt, having this debuff active on you is probably the scariest part of the entire fight. All the tank kits are very predictable, and it's very scripted. You know exactly when the damage is going to come in terms of the big tank kit. What I think a lot of people don't take into consideration is the fact that you've got 150% damage increase. You're taunting with this bite stack up on you, those melees really hurt. So I pre-pop double Iron Fur, I taunt, I've still got the debuff. And even with this, like the melees are still pretty substantial. But yeah, definitely make sure that you're popping an Iron Fur for the taunt swaps when you've got this debuff active. We get the wins here. Now again, one tip that I will say, on normal we were pretty lazy with the puddles, and in this kill, to be fair, we were as well. On our first kill with lower eye level, these drop-offs, like when you're dropping off these puddles, it actually hurt quite significantly. So looking at the minimap here, we placed one behind the group to use for the wins. On our first kill, we were using like quadrants of the rooms. We were having 2 of them go either side of the boss, quite far away. I would definitely again recommend doing that if you've got lower eye level or if you're progressing the boss. Another tip as well, make sure you're standing in the puddle preemptively before the wins cast ends. I've seen a lot of people, a friend's guild of mine, they're much more casual, they just raid for ahead of the curve and they're progressing Raszageth right now. None of them were doing this. A lot of people that I've seen will stand outside and they'll get knocked into the puddle. Whereas if you're stood in the puddle preemptively, you don't get knocked at all and you reduce the damage you take quite significantly. The other benefit of standing in it preemptively is the fact that you can keep uptime on the boss. If you're getting knocked from where my mouse is now, sort of in the cluster of people, you're going to get knocked to like around the middle of the circle. So you're losing uptime, you're losing GCDs. You will see here that our DH actually gets knocked out. He gets knocked into the middle of the circle but manages to just foul rush back straight away because he's the DH brain, so doesn't really affect him. But yeah, definitely stand in this ahead of time. So my co-tank's got the debuff, mine's fallen off. As we're 49 seconds into the fight and then my second bite's coming up, I've delayed my second bark use. As much as I want to send it for DPS, I'm delaying this to make sure that I've got it up for the bite. So I've got one Iron Fair rolling, I bark skin, I get my Maul proc, my Twisted Claws. Oh sorry, my Tooth and Claw proc, not Twisted Claws, my Tooth and Claw proc for that damage reduction. Here I know that my co-tank's taunted. I got a random bark, I didn't call for this, but it's whatever, I'm not going to complain about free DR. I actually just said Rage of the Sleeper on CD. The reason for this is my Whetstone's 2 minutes, I know that my Rage is 2 minutes, and I want them for the intermission to line up together. On most other fights, and you can go from my other videos, playing double on use, my rank 1 Aeronog for example, I'm pretty much always sending Rage of the Sleeper with Grief Torch, not with Whetstone. However, on this fight in the intermission, I want Whetstone for the ads, so that's why I use Whetstone on the pull of this fight rather than Grief Torch. I want them to line up together. So I'm sending the Rage of the Sleeper for DPS here, just pumping the boss, still at nearly 60k. We get the next wins here. This is my Raw, roaring the group over. We're already sitting it preemptively. We get the AMZ. You can see all the healing cooldowns next to my chat here on RT. So this is what I was talking about at the start of the video when I talked about talent choices. This is where in-cap Raw is extremely prominent and beneficial on this fight. I would say 100% of the time, if you're a Guardian Druid on this fight, don't in the team, take in-cap Raw. It's so good. This is probably the scariest damage phase of P1. I've seen a lot of tanks talking about different options to survive this point. A lot of people have been asking questions about how to reduce damage taken here. When these orbs break, you do take dam, and you get a tank hit. Now the good thing for me, as I'm taking the first and the third, so I'm taking the odd numbers and my co-tank takes 2 and 4, he takes the even numbers. As a DK, for the wins, he can just Death's Advance and not get pushed back, so the boss is faced away. He can then AMS, so if you watch his frame here, on the left hand side, he can AMS the bite plus all the lightning. It's very strong and he takes no damage from this. So if you've got the option, I would definitely go first and third. So he takes the hit, he's got AMS active. The light grey over the frame is absorbs on my grid. His absorb doesn't break. His AMS literally doesn't break through all of this. You can also see I in-cap Raw just here. I'm going to go back a little bit for you. So I in-cap Raw. They've got ads around us. In-cap Raw now. All of those ads get broken. Now on Heroic, they do have 2 debuffs rather than 1. You can see on some of the frames there's still 2 left. That means you have to interrupt or CC them twice. But in-cap Raw is such a handy tool just to break a big cluster of them. This spark here, I believe I do kick. Kick that one, my co-tank kicks his. I taunt the boss after his hit. One thing I forgot to mention actually, another reason why going first and third is so good, you get so many more mauls and so much more opportunity to maul when you don't have to Iron Fur if you're taking this tank set. When you're in the wins, you're waiting for your second tank hit and the third tank hit of the fight to come in. The boss is casting the wins. You've got like a 10-second grace period where you don't have to Iron Fur at all and you can dump all of your rage into mauls. So that's also another big benefit that I forgot to talk about before, but yeah, something to bear in mind. At this point as well, we phase the boss. It phases at 65%. Our first kill was around a 2-minute phase 1. I did not expect this kill to be this quick, so my cooldowns are very misaligned. Previously, I was saving this bark skin for bite 5, which is my third bite of phase 1. I was normally taking stagger from our evoker just to tide me over and then taking bark for the tank hit. Now with our kill time, I can see the boss is about to phase. I just send the bark skin. I have no real use for it. I want to stop those auto attacks from hurting me too much. So carry on hitting the boss here. You can still hit it when it flies. Spending rage is CDR on our Incarn, like cooldown reduction, and we want Incarn for the intermission for add aggro. So definitely carry on hitting the boss as much as you can. I would say for most kills, you're going to aim for a 2-minute phase 1. So you're probably going to get 6 tank busters in total. And you want to push before bite 7 in phase 1. That's like a pretty standard phase 1 kill time. That's what we had 2 weeks ago on our first kill when we were sub 400. That means you're going to have Incarn for every intermission phase anyway. But yeah, in my kill we were a bit quicker. So here I'm actually adjusting all of my cooldowns on the fly. I'm still using thrashes even when I can't hit the boss, just for that bit of rage. Stacking up, we're getting knocked here. Now for the Ruiners, at this point, when you get knocked, you do take full damage. So if you watch the raid frames, everybody on my side takes quite a significant amount of full damage from the knock. As a Guardian, you can either tab target the Ruiner or like click target the Ruiner, and you can spam Wild Charge or Skull Bash to kick as well and charge the ad. But if you charge, you don't take the full damage. So I'm spamming tab here, I'm charging, I'm taking no full damage, whereas everybody else is. Now for the Ruiners, you can see it on my unit frame and also on my nameplate very faintly. The absorb that you have, when that's broken, that's when the ads spawn. So I'm saving my next thrash for when this breaks. On this ad, typically in our previous kill, I had Incarn for this ad. So what I would do is I would Incarn when the small ads spawn, and that would then carry over for the second Ruiner, and I would use Rage of the Sleeper plus Trinket on the third Ruiner. In this kill, however, I didn't have that, so I opted to fully swap my cooldowns, and I use Rage of the Sleeper plus Trinket on this ad, and I Incarn ad 2 and ad 3. I was a bit afraid of aggro, and that's sort of how you have to play as a tank. Just really send cooldowns on these ads to make sure you've got aggro. I didn't actually need to send Trinket on these ads. I think it was a massive waste, especially for my log. Our DPS were destroying these Acolytes and Vanguards on the first set. Everybody popped cooldowns on them as 2 minutes just came up. We also got a really bad breath on us. It's pretty RNG which side it goes to first, and we were the side to get the boss first. So my Trinket here, I'm not hitting any of these, which is very sad, but it happens. I know for next time. Using dash here, I wild charge, I shift back into bear, and now I've got Incarn. Now, one thing I will say, this shield breaks so quickly. This was a misplay. In my opinion, you do not want to be thrashing this Ruiner until the shield's broken. You're better off just using Mangle and Mauls just to make sure that this shield breaks and like putting up your Moonfire. The reason being is when the ads spawn, the Ruiner and the Acolytes, you're going to be using triple thrash anyway to pick up the small ads and also just generate threat on them and, you know, put your thrash bleed on them. When you're doing that, you're also going to be applying thrash to this Ruiner. So in my opinion, there is no point of spending 2 GCDs to put 2 thrashes up for the shield to then break to have to repress it 3 times. That's just, in my opinion, illogical. So I did misplay it, and I put one on the Ruiner before the ad spawn, but it is what it is. I'm jumping, making sure my thrash is hitting all of the ads. Once my thrash is maintained, I'm spending that Mangle proc, getting my 4-set buff. I'm also barking here again, pretty much just for DPS. I'm in Incarn, so I don't need the defensive value. We stay here and we wait for the boss to breath over this ad before moving to the next one. We could quite happily move these ads into the next Surging Ruiner and cleaving all of them down together. But if you do that, then the breath is going to be baited on the next ad, which we don't want. So yeah, we baited the breath on the second one. Once it's baited here, I use Stampeding Roar. We move over to the ad. This one we all have Grief Torches for, so you're going to see the shield breaks and the ad gets to about 55 or so % once our Grief Torches are popped. One does come in a bit later, so we all send, shield breaks. Now we get another Grief Torch and he's on 51%. I still have Incarn rolling. Again, I can still maintain these thrash stacks. Yeah, getting my 4-set buffs. The boss lands over here now, and we do get a breath bait right over this console, which is a little bit scary, but again, we know we've got the DPS for it, so we just commit. We kill the ads off, and we all gate back before the breath happens. On the other side, they're finishing their ad off. I will say, I actually love Raszageth as a boss design. I think it's a very fun boss. I've got cutting edge over the past sort of 4 or 5 years on every boss besides Una, and this is definitely one of my favorite fights. Especially as a Guardian Druid, I think it's just really fun. However, this is the one part that annoys me, just all the boss flying can be a bit tedious, but anyway. So I stood here waiting for the boss, but he does land. Moonfiring, I'm taunting because I start. Establishing Thrash, just getting my forceps buff. So here we're going to get the Absorb Shield, and we're going to get the positive and negative charges. There are a few different strats on how to handle these. The one that we opted for our first kill was the same as the Mythic strat, which I think is better than what we did here, so I'm going to talk about that first. Typically, what guilds will do on Heroic difficulty is they're going to put a red marker under the boss for the negative debuffs, and they're going to put a blue one side and a moon the other side for the positive debuffs. Now what this allows you to do is have all of the negatives go straight under the boss, and then all of the positives move to either side. The reason this is beneficial is because if you're a ranged DPS or a healer planted over in Africa, having to move all the way to this stacking point is quite tedious. It's quite, a slog. It's a very far walk to run, so having those two stacking points is much better. The other reason this is beneficial is because in Heroic, if two debuffs walk over each other, you do pulse a slight bit of AoE. It's fine if you get one hit here and there, but what can happen in pub raids, especially if everybody's accumulating on a very close marker together, you're all running there, and there's a big chance that you're going to have multiple explosions. The only reason that we did this strat, which is typically what's done on normal, we did have a few socials in. The DH, for example, one of our warlocks. We had a few socials from the guild come in for this kill, just to try and bump up the loot to get a 5th piece. So we wanted to do the simplest strat that we could, just to make sure that it was easy for the socials to get their head around. So we opted to do negatives on red, positives on blue. I am actually saving cooldowns here as well, which I'm not sure if that was a mistake or not in terms of DPS. I don't bark, I don't use Rage of the Sleeper until the shield comes, but now my trinket is desynced. So I get positive, I'm waiting. We do run over one person, but it's not the end of the world. The Warlock being MVP, waiting for everybody there. I rage, I bark, and I'm just pumping DPS into the shield. I don't get a GG proc, unfortunately, so I have to reapply Moonfire manually, but that happens, that is what it is. We spread again. I'm taking the first Jaws soon. Now at this point, we're 3 minutes 49 into the boss, and I haven't spent SI. I haven't used it at all this fight. And this is what I was talking about previously, where I'm saying I don't personally believe double SI in this fight is that necessary. Outside of maybe the last phase and a very slow pug kill, I don't think double SI is that necessary, especially in a guild or coordinated group. So I'm just like, screw it. I'm going to send SI on this tank here. I've got nothing else to press anyway. And I want it for the last phase, so I'm just getting it on cooldown really. So I pre-frenzy to top myself. I don't even Iron Fur because SI is so good. We get the wins straight after, so my co-tank taunts after the bite, and then it's wins. The first wins is my Raw. One thing I will mention that again a lot of groups don't seem to do, and my co-tank doesn't do, none of my DPS players do, or my guildies do, but if you're stood directly under the boss in the middle of the room, the pushback does almost nothing. Especially with a Raw, you're going to see now I barely get knocked in comparison to being stood on the outer ring, which again, that does happen to me later, which I can reference. You get pushed miles versus me being in the middle with Raw, I barely get knocked. I take no damage from it in comparison to some people. So that's just, again, pretty useful. Make sure you're trying to be stood in the middle of the room, directly under the boss. We get the charges here, they move out. I think one went on a pug, or one of our socials, so it did spread, but that's fine. My DK gets hit here. I still have the debuff, and this is the scary overlap with the sparks. This is probably the scariest point of this phase. So I bark plus Iron Fur on this taunt. I don't just Iron Fur. The reason is I want the bark for these sparks. So I do bark, I roar, I break them all. We get another wave, and this one I'm not stood quite in the middle, and I get pushed so much further. Yes, I didn't have the roar, but again, it's mainly the positioning. I was stood on this outer ring rather than being central. I call Stagger here from our Evoker just to save my own CDs. And I know as well that the Storm Shield here is coming up, so I can freely send Incarn. I'm holding my Incarn for this second Storm Shield to really pump DPS. As Incarn's 30 seconds and the Storm Shield for us is about a 15-20 second DPS window to break it, I know that I can Incarn now, I can stack up some Iron Furs, and my Incarn's going to carry over for the DPS portion of the shield buff. So I incarn, I get 4 Iron Furs rolling. I've already got the stagger. I dipped to about 50%, but I'm fine. I frenzied regen on the walk. I get the negative debuff. I go to cross, and now I'm in incarn. I Rage of the Sleeper. I've got Grief Torch, so actually previously desyncing my Whetstone and my Rage of the Sleeper was beneficial, because now I've got Grief Torch due to a death. So Grief Torch comes up with this damage phase. I send the Grief Torch here, just quite a lot of dam. I think I hit about 61k in this shield phase, I believe. Maybe that's the next one, I don't know. Yeah, okay, 58k from this one. Heart just comes up. I debated whether to send Heart, but I end up, after a bit of back and forth, I just send it, because I think I'll probably get another one in the last phase anyway. We get Sparks again here. I've just taken aggro. I bark again, preemptively for the Sparks. We get the winds. I roar. I don't roar actually. My roar's the next one, that's fine. We do have 1 death. That means I get Grief Torch back, which is great. Now, again, talking about second SI, talking about my gear at the start of the video and how you might have to play differently to me. At this point, I do call for Bark. I don't get the Bark. I presume my Razsageth Druid's resing the Hunter, or actually we don't have a CR, so I don't know why I don't get the Bark, but that's absolutely fine. I have nothing else to press at this point, but I know that I'm pretty geared, so I just I use an Iron Fur. I've got my Healthstone, I've got my Health Pot, I've got Renewal, and I've also got the Honed Mind to fall back on. I take the hit, I dip to 40, my Honed Mind procs instantly, and I use Renewal, and I believe I use a Health Pot. Yeah, so I Renewal, I Health Pot, my Honed Mind procs, and that's enough to top me, and I'm very safe because I know my DK is going to taunt anyway. So I actually take this hit with just Iron Fur, and I'm healing myself through the damage, making sure that I'm fully ready to top myself after the hit, as opposed to having something pop beforehand. Now I get the Bark a bit late, unfortunately, but it's absolutely fine. I also delayed this Grief Torch just to make sure that I was safe. This is probably a bit of a misplay, and I probably should have sent it sooner, but I saw people dipping. I was trying to wait for the Rage, but I wasn't sure if on this wins more people would die, so I'd get another use in a minute. Heart's falling off here. We do have a death, so that Grief Torch send was great, but I just send the Rage. I don't know why I send the Rage. I should delay this Rage for the Grief Torch in the shield phase, but again, whatever. Kotank takes the hit. I taunt, I Iron Fell once. I don't pop Bark here though, because we're going into the Surge phase. I missed my roar on the last hit, which is, you know, my fault. So I just roared for this stack, as after this we're going to be facing the boss anyway. I bark for DPS, I send the Grief Torch, pumping damage into the boss here. And I believe, yeah, this is the one I end about 60k on. Yeah, 59.5 or so. We've got a few deaths, it's fine, we are a healer down though. So in this phase of the fight, the difference between normal and heroic is the fact that you get 2 adds. So on our kill, we actually opted to just zerg one down completely. So I am actually 180 degrees, so looking from a DPS orientation from their point of view, where my mouse is now, that's the left side and this is the right side. From my POV, I go to the left ad, but yeah, in our kill it is the right ad, so I'll probably call it the right ad a few times. So yeah, in our kill, every DPS goes and nukes the left ad, while I go to the right ad with a few melee. We don't even send a healer here just because of the wildfire healing and stuff, and there's not that much going on really. The Storm Fiend does emit 5 balls of lightning from it, which you've got to dodge. They do stun you, and you've also got the lightning orbs from the other ad to dodge as well, so the room does get a bit full here. Now the boss is lined up for the breath. The breath is slightly mispositioned, like it goes between both ads but not in a direct line, it sort of goes diagonally through them. I'm paranoid of this. On our first night of Raszageth 2 weeks ago, I actually died to the beam once, and since then, like, the animation is, in my opinion, quite a lot bigger than it actually seems, so I run quite far. I do get stunned here by an orb, but that's fine. It's way better to be stunned than it is to be hit by breath, and yeah, you can see that I move quite far. We do have a social die, but again, it's fine. I just frenzied regen the ball hit and I'm completely fine. I charge over, and now the ad TP is. Now you can see that I'm on the right ad, it's pretty high. The left ad that they're killing is pretty low HP. I incarn here. and I use Bark and Rage of the Sleeper, and the little lads spawn, and I'm just cleaving them down, as well as establishing Thrash on this Storm Fiend. I don't know why I don't Whetstone. I think it's because on our first kill, I was saving Whetstone for the second set of small lads because we did get 2 sets on the first kill. I should have realized that our DPS was way higher, and I should use Whetstone here. I don't. It's a misplay on my behalf. I also know that this Storm Fiend is so low, there's no point of waiting over here. So as soon as I've got my DPS out and these Stormlings die, I'm straight back on the ad that I was on previously. I don't wait around. There's no point of staying on that ad because it's going to die before I've, finished my Incarn. I maintain my Thrash again on this ad. It doesn't fall off, which is great. I do get stunned once, but it's whatever. Now we get a really awkward breath timing. The ad TPs again. Now on our first kill, the breath wasn't baited over the small ads. It was baited over the big one in a different direction. And this ad was much higher HP. So I move out of the breath. It's a bit cringe. I'm in an Incarn. I don't get to hit these ads at all. But the big ad dies and these despawn anyway, so it's not the end of the world. But I should be using Whetstone and the last couple of seconds of Incarn to, kill these off. But that's whatever. Now we get the call to stack on Skullhead marker on our raid leader. We're going to get knocked soon, but what you can do is you can already establish buffs and some threat on the boss here. So I managed to get 2 Thrash stacks before the knock, which is great because it carries over into the next phase. I'm also building some rage. I get my Moonfire up and so on. So everyone's stacking, but I'm building my Thrashes up. I get the second charge before the knock. Here we go into the last phase and we land. Our whole team plants and the tanks go to the other side. This is pretty common practice on this fight. Tanks definitely should move. If you're a tank that thinks you should plant, you're wrong. You should definitely move to the other side. It is much, much better for the healers and ranged DPS to just plant here, start pumping, and the healers top the raid off than it is for the tanks to plant and make everybody else move. So me and my co-tank, we run across. On our first kill as well, we were slower, so we did get a second lust. I don't believe we get one in this kill. It's much quicker. As soon as you phase, you take a few melees and you go straight into the first tank blast. I frenzy through these melees with 1 Iron Fur just to top myself off. The melees are never really going to kill you if you've got a bit of spot healing going on and you've got mitigation up. So the first tank hit for me, I'm using Bark plus Rage of the Sleeper, and with my eye level, that's perfectly fine to keep the group healthy. I Bark, I Rage. I use 1 Iron Fur just because at the end of it, you do take, quite often I've taken 1 melee. But my co-tank was very quick on the taunt this time, so as soon as that breath ended, he was taunting. Now, how this works actually, this is different to P1. So the tank blast, you get a debuff. The amount of damage you take from the blast will then pulse an AoE to the raid for a portion of the damage you took. So essentially, the less damage you take from that tank blast, the less damage you're going to deal to the raid. So it's very, very, very important as a tank that you've got big cooldowns up for this. I also Whetstone in the rage window just for damage. And there's a tank blast that goes off. We've got ascendance from the shaman. The breath happens here, and we're going to get gripped. So our warlock Paz, he gets the pull charge. Make sure that you're walking far away. What you want to have is you want to have the breath baited, and you want to have the pull move to the side, and everybody else should wait there. Bait the breath and then move, and then we're going to get gripped out of the breath's frontal, or the boss frontal. Now we get the debuffs, the charges, they're going to move to the edge of the room, and right now I'm just sending DPS. I'm waiting for a 4-step proc. I pot here, and I'm waiting to Grief Torch for a 4-step, but I don't think I get it. Yeah, so I just send the Grief Torch now in pot, and now I get the 4-step proc typically. Again, the life of a DK, my co-tank's taking his first blast here, which is the second blast of the fight. He uses AMS, and he is just sat there chilling, nothing going on. I'm a bit envious watching this POV back, but anyway, it's fine. I taunt, his AMS doesn't even break. I frenzy with some Iron Furs just to top myself off here. Now, at this point, I actually send the Bark skin. Now, I know the boss is on 12%. I've got the SI ready, and I'm only going to take 1 more blast in 15 seconds, and then the fight's over, from my POV anyway. I know that the fourth one's going to go on my DK. We're never going to get a fifth one unless something goes extremely wrong, and I've got externals to cover that anyway. So I just bark to reduce those melee attacks. I want to maul as much as possible, and I don't really feel like I need Iron Furs on the melees for this boss if I've got bark skin up. I move into the middle here. I roar. We get a pushback, but not too bad. I've got bark up anyway, so I'm kind of chilling. We get the breath. My bark falls off. I get the Tooth and Claw proc for this, plus the SI. I rage here for damage. The blast goes off. We're perfectly healthy. My co-tank taunts into a Grief Torch to establish some aggro. I've also got Incarn rolling here. I bark again because we get a symbols from our priest, so that gets bark back up, which is really, really handy. So I'm just barking here for damage in my CD window, pumping as much as I can. And then here, as the boss is so low, these are the last debuffs of the fight, the charges. Our DPS just plant and they just zug the boss, basically. They just burn the boss down. They don't even move out, but again, we're pretty high eye level, so it doesn't really matter. And then the boss dies. So yeah, overall, this fight, I would say it's very, very fun. And actually, Bear has a great toolkit for it. With Incap Roar for the adds, Stampeding Roar for the wins. You've got really, really, really good burst damage. The only thing I think is a little bit lackluster for Bear is add threat in P2. But again, following this cooldown rotation, I think you're absolutely fine. You might struggle a little bit if you've got lower eye level and you're wearing defensive trinkets perhaps, or more defensive talent setups. But again, you can bring a hunter or a rogue to trick you or MD you on your side of the platform for one ad set, and you should be absolutely fine. But yeah, hopefully this video helps some of you guys. I know it's not the most in-depth or detailed video out there. But as I said at the start of the video, the Guardian Discord's had quite a few questions recently asking how to tank this boss, so I thought I would just do a quick commentary and a quick breakdown of my kill, and hopefully this can be a good reference for some of you guys that are trying to work on your ahead of the curve achievements. Yeah, thanks for watching, and if you guys have any more questions or want any more help, definitely jump into the Dreamgrove Discord. There's loads of friendly faces in there that I'd be happy to do log reviews, VOD reviews and so on, or you can PM me directly. I'll leave my Discord tag in the description. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.